Hey everybody, Cody Shirk coming to you from a super windy beach. I'm going to discuss Trump and IVF, which sounds like two of the craziest topics to address, but really I'm going to dive into a much larger topic which is affecting the entire world, specifically the West, and I'm going to explain how you can capitalize on this opportunity and tell you about some companies that are looking very attractive right now. So rewind a little bit. Trump just announced that he's going to provide IVF services to those in the US who want it, funded by the government, or he's going to force insurance companies to pay for the service. IVF is in vitro fertilization, which is an artificial way to impregnate a woman, to put sperm into an egg and get a child to be born. In the US, it's extremely expensive to get this service. It's between $15,000 and $30,000 for one treatment. And many parents who struggle getting pregnant will have multiple treatments. So you can imagine how expensive this gets. But there's a much, much bigger story here, and that is the declining childbirth rates around the world, and specifically in the West and developed nations. It's really a crisis, and the world needs to address this now. And if they don't, there's going to be some serious issues. In fact, many countries are probably too late. For example, South Korea has a childbirth rate of 0.9. And to understand what that number means, in order for a civilization to continue to grow, or at least stay even in population terms, you need a childbirth rate of 2.1. So two parents produce two children, replacing those two parents, right? The reason why it's 2.1 is for infant mortality and other mishaps that may not allow those children to then go on and create their own children. So you need to have a birth rate of 2.1 just for replacement. South Korea has a childbirth rate of 0.9. And on one hand, you may think, oh, that just means they're not going to have as many children. But if you think about it deeper, in a couple generations, they're not going to be a South Korean culture. They're going to be gone. They're going to have less and less and less people being born, which means their culture, their civilization is going to disappear. And if you think South Korea is alone on this, you'd be wrong, because almost every single country in the West has a childbirth rate significantly below 2.1. China, France, Italy, Spain, almost all of Western Europe has a childbirth rate around 1.3, still way below the 2.1 number. The United States has a childbirth rate of 1.7. That's still significantly below. So you can see this is a huge problem that countries need to tackle right now, and the bigger picture is the world needs to tackle this right now if we want civilization to at least exist at the current population levels. So right now, as I speak, countries are addressing this proactively. Not all of them, but some of them. And some of them are taking very aggressive measures. The best example is Hungary. Hungary just announced that for a mother, if you have 4 children or more, you will not pay income taxes for life. So that's a pretty crazy opportunity. Obviously, having 4 children is a big commitment. It's a lot of work, but you won't have to pay taxes. The government of Hungary is basically saying, hey, we prioritize you having children so much that we're willing to forego you contributing money to our tax system because we value people in our society more than just getting some tax money from you. And also, if you think about it, if one mother has 4 children, that's going to be more people into the future for that country, for Hungary, to pull taxes out of, or just to stimulate their economy. Hungary has also provided programs that allow the grandparents to get compensated by the government for taking care of their grandchildren. There's tax benefits for purchasing vehicles. There's all kinds of tax incentives that Hungary has rolled out in order to encourage increasing childbirth rates. The same thing is happening in Norway and Finland, where they are providing maternity leave and paternity leave. Both Norway and Finland provide almost a year of maternity leave, fully paid for by the government, and paternity leave. So mother and father get to take work off for a year to get paid by the government at a capped rate in order to raise their children. And if anybody has children watching this video, I have 2 of them. You know it's a lot of work to raise a child, and that first year is very difficult. So it makes sense that a government would want to support It's people by allowing them to focus on raising children. In the US, which is, of course, the #1 most developed nation in the world with the highest GDP, we actually have the worst policies when it comes to maternity, paternity leave, and just encouragement to have children in general. In fact, the US government has no mandate to provide any type of leave, although certain states throughout the US do provide leave. Oregon is actually the best state in the US. They provide 12 weeks of paid leave for the mother. It's capped at about $1,500 a week. So, I mean, 12 weeks is 3 months. That's, again, if you have children, 3 months is just like scratching the surface. You really need a lot more time to focus on your kids. Around the world, there's other countries that are now starting to roll out programs that will give you money to have children. For example, South Korea has some private companies that are paying their employees up to $70,000, a one-time payment, in order to have a child. However, there's a much, much bigger picture here, and that is that no matter how much money and tax incentives governments are throwing out there, for the most part, people are still not having children. And why is that? Well, in my personal opinion, and many others, it's that our culture just doesn't support having children. If you're watching this and you have kids, you know when you take your kids out, you need to fly with them, you go to a restaurant, you're going to the doctor's office, you're anywhere out in public. Most Western societies are not really set up to help you with your kids. In fact, a lot of times you'll get like dirty looks if you're bringing your kids around. My kids are pretty well behaved, but I'm like, oh, I'm dreading if I have to go anywhere and do anything where I know I'm going to be treated differently and people are going to be more or less frustrated that I have my kids with me. And this is a cultural thing. Most developed nations, as nations develop, their birth rate declines. And there's a lot of reasons that could happen. One is that, hey, people might just get more selfish and they're not really worried about procreating. They're more worried about having fun in their life, taking Instagram pictures and traveling the world. But what happens is you have a culture that all of a sudden doesn't value the family unit and doesn't value raising kids. South Korea, ironically, even though they're in the worst situation and the government is rolling out programs, South Korea has many restaurants where you're not allowed to take your children. So there's a whole population, not only in South Korea, but in many parts of the world where they just don't tolerate children at all. And if you're a parent or thinking about having a kid, you're thinking, why would I have kids if the society I live in is not only not supporting me, but actually almost looking down on me? And let's not forget also that the cost of living in first world developed countries is very expensive, very, very expensive. And if you're sending your kid to a private school or even regular school, you gotta feed them, clothe them, all that. And it is a ton of work. Okay, let's move on to the investment opportunities here, because you may be thinking this is such a big problem and such a wild beast to forecast that it's gonna be difficult to identify ways to invest in what's going on here. So the simplest way is that since Trump just announced this IVF program, it's highly likely that other countries are going to follow suit and also provide similar services if they're not already. And who's going to benefit from that? IVF companies. And I have 3 of them that I'll list right now. One is Progeny, it's publicly traded. One is the Cooper companies, publicly traded. And another is Sarah Prognostics, again, publicly traded. You can invest in these companies right now. And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised to see them pop in the coming weeks because of what Trump recently announced. I don't know about the actual financials of those companies, so it's not necessarily a recommendation. It's just a way to say, look, there is a way to invest in this trend. And if the government is going to be paying for these services, guess what? These IVF companies are going to benefit enormously because, as everyone knows, if you ever get a government contract, it's like free money, right? It's just like the Lockheed Martins, the Boeings, the Raytheons who support all the war efforts for the US. They have guaranteed money coming from government contracts. And what a better way and what an opposite way to have government contracts be put towards something better. Instead of war, let's get children to be birthed. So those are 3 companies that you can invest in. Myself, I often invest in private companies, and I'm been getting a lot of emails recently. Probably over the past several months, I've gotten a half dozen opportunities to invest in early stage, so VC-backed kind of angel investment opportunities that are addressing this IVF issue, but also addressing larger issues like providing services and products for companies, for restaurants, for public facilities to actually take care of kids better. So basically to make life easier for parents, to encourage them having kids. So a lot of these early stage companies, obviously they're not publicly traded yet, but I've seen this trend, I see it happening, and it's probably because millennials, which is the largest consumer group right now, are starting companies because they see the problem for themselves. If you're a millennial and you have kids right now, you're thinking to yourself, holy crap, it is so hard to raise kids, and what can I do to make this easier? Oh, I'll start a company. And that's what's happening right now in Silicon Valley. I've seen, again, about a half dozen companies over the past couple months, and that's just run across my desk. I'm sure there's many, many more. But these companies are likely to get acquired by the larger healthcare providers, maybe go public, or provide great services overall. So the bigger picture here is the announcement that Trump made about IVF. It sounds very political, and of course it is political. He wants to win over a certain portion of the population by supporting the family unit, by supporting women who want to have children. But as an investor and someone looking at the world, this is a much, much, much bigger topic that the world is going to have to contend with within the next couple of decades, or else we're in big, big trouble. China, for example, is a perfect country to point out to. They had their one-child policy that has completely backfired on them. A little bit of history there. China was a fast-growing nation, and they put a cap on how many children you can have. It's called literally the one-child policy. Well, not only did China go away with that policy about 5 years ago, or actually about a decade ago, but about 5 years ago, they said, hey, we actually need you to have as many children as you want, and we will help you with almost everything. They're giving great maternity leave to parents. They are giving out free baby clothes, free baby accessories like food, bottles, all that type of stuff. So China has completely reversed course because they know their one-child policy really screwed them over. Other countries, although they didn't have the draconian one-child policy that China had, their societies have just changed culturally, like I mentioned before, that they're not encouraging childbirth, but now they're reversing course to encourage people to have babies, to encourage people to procreate, to have people that are going to grow up and contribute to the economies, cultures, and societies of these individual countries. Again, remember, if you are not procreating, if you're not having a childbirth rate of at least 2.1, your population is going to decline. Over in Africa, in the Sahel region, which I've talked about in other videos, this is a region that geopolitically is very uncertain right now because there's actually a lot of conflict going on there. A big battle for resources, gold, uranium, other rare earth metals. But this region of Africa, so we're looking at like Mali, Congo, Sudan, Central African Republic, all that area, they have an extremely high birth rate. Their birth rate is 6 or higher. So every mother is having at least 6 children, which is, I mean, I can't even imagine having 6 children. That seems like a ton of work. But that area of the world is growing in population. Meanwhile, almost all the rest of the world, as I mentioned before, is declining and declining significantly. So this isn't a trend that's gonna, reverse course next year or even next decade. This is a very long trend, and if you're like myself, middle-aged or older, this is a trend that we'll probably not see the end results of, unfortunately. But from an investment perspective and understanding what governments are going to do in order to support childbirth rates, it's pretty attractive. It's pretty attractive to think about governments paying companies to have more children, and if you're an investor in those companies, that is quite the opportunity. All right, guys, that's it. I'm roasting. Have a good one. See you guys. Forgot to tell you, if you want to see those companies you can invest in, just go down below. I'll list them all. There's way too many for me to tell you right now. Plus, I can't remember them off the top of my head. I'll provide an entire list. Just check out down below. You'll find it. See ya.